Welcome to episode 3 of the webit.net podcast, recorded live on August 24th, 2011. In this episode, we're going to talk about what's going on in Wibbit land. Is it true that Bryan's favorite song is It's Rainin' Men? Microsoft is poaching former webOS developers to work for the Windows Phone platform. A new study shows that Android is attracting some bad friends. Steve Jobs resigns as CEO of Apple. What does this mean for his legion of Apple fanatics? Also, are we living in a post-PC world or a PC plus world? All this and much, much more on the webit.net podcast. For more content, you can find us on iTunes, webit.podomatic.com, and of course, webit.net, WIBIT.net.
Welcome to the webit.net podcast. Tonight we have the whole crew. Kevin, yours truly. We also have Bryan on the line. Hey, Bryan.
Hey.
And we have Jason. What's going on, Jason?
What's shaking, Kev?
Nothing much. Hey, Gary, how you doing?
Fine, Kev. How are you doing?
Wow, Gary really sounds pissed off at me. Did you hear that? He's like, fine.
I'll brighten it up.
Yeah, fire it up a little bit.
Well,
so in this...
them a little bit there, Gary. We don't want to, shut people too much.
Yeah, we don't want to scare anybody. So in this podcast, guys, we're just going to basically go over a couple of updates from webit.net, and we're also going to kind of discuss a few things that are happening in the world of technology. So the first thing that we want to discuss is Jason has put in a bunch of new updates for the site, and maybe you can just kind of talk to us about what you've done and what the users can expect.
All right. Well, as most people know that use the site regularly, performance is great at times, and at other times it's not so great. What you don't know is that that's because we're trying to kind of make a mountain out of a molehill here. We have a very underpowered server, and we're trying to do the best we can to deliver some pretty dynamic content with that underpowered, box. So what I've done is I've gone out and found a third-party caching solution that should be able to speed us up a good bit. They are taking the site, caching it, and then delivering it to you from their servers, so there won't be any more downtime. There won't be need to take the site into maintenance mode on Fridays like I've been doing for the past month or so. All updates can just start rolling out as we're ready to roll them out. I've been testing it all day, and it's been working great. The only thing that has been busted because of it is we enacted SSL for login on Friday. With these new caching mechanisms, that has been disabled again for the next day or so, while this third-party caching solution validates our SSL certificate themselves. They have to do it because they're passing our page along through proxy. Once that's done, login through SSL will be re-implemented pretty seamlessly. You guys should not notice any difference. But one of the things that we did do that, besides just increase the site performance, is I added something called Aperture on the site. So now if you go to webit.net and you highlight any one word or a phrase or something, it will bring up a little box above that highlighted text that says Learn More. And that'll do a site search. It'll search our site, it'll search our YouTube page, and it'll also search the internet and give you a little pop-up window with those search results in a way that's inobtrusive and very clean on the page.
Also in the news, we're going to be coming out with a mobile app for webit.net. Bryan, what's going on with that?
So the mobile app will let you view any of our courses offline. Initially, it's going to be developed for the iPad and the iPhone. And it will be kind of nice because I think there's a lot of situations where you might not have a second monitor, you might want to have, but you have an iPad, and you'll prop up the iPad, play the lessons, and kind of program along with them. Or if you travel a lot, you can bring it up on your iPhone while you're in a subway or something. You don't need an internet.
Yeah, on an airplane or something.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah,
I think you guys are really going to like it. They look really nice. They'll also have these great quick reference cheat sheets that will basically teach you a lesson or a course at a glance. And you can kind of zoom in and zoom out of the different concepts that you want to just grab. So if you can't remember, C++, the for structure, you can just pinch into the for loop, and it'll show you an example of it.
Yeah, we've been getting a lot of requests about offline viewing, and this is kind of our response to that. And it'll be you can take webit.net anywhere, offline viewing. It's going to be really great and really convenient.
Yeah, so the first one we put up there is going to be obviously Intro to Programming and kind of see how the feedback goes, and then we'll release the rest of the 7 courses up as we can.
We have also another webit.net news item is I have put out a challenge to you wannabe Objective-C developers to help us develop a better tic-tac-toe program. So as those of you guys that have been following the course know, in our Objective-C course, we kind of finish off with a iPhone game where we made a tic-tac-toe game from scratch to kind of demonstrate the skills that you've learned from the beginning of just building regular basic Hey Buddy programs all the way up into using the language in a very fun, very exciting, and a very modern way. What we want to do is we want to re-release the iPhone app with a few other modifications to make the game a little bit more exciting, a little more fun. Stupid little things like keeping score and that kind of stuff. But we also want to be able to add some artificial intelligence to the app. And we want you, the Objective-C developer, to give us an algorithm that will perform a intelligent CPU move. And what we've done is on the blog, you'll see that we've given a method in a section of code where we comment for you to put your algorithm. So we desperately want you guys to get involved and give us your code so we can credit you in the App Store, we can credit you on the website and inside the app itself. It's a great opportunity for you to get your name out there, to get some recognition, and we really hope that we get some people interested in doing that, besides me and Bryan. And Gary, of course. Are you still pissed off at me, Gary? Because, I'm trying to be nice here.
Well, I can't help it, kid. Sorry.
I also noticed today, Jason, that you put a little bit of a teaser on the Java course on the homepage, on the featured video section.
I did. It's no more of a teaser than we already had on the YouTube page. It's just the first video for the introduction to Java. It's been on YouTube for, I think, about a month now. It's been up on YouTube, but I don't think a lot
probably
of
about that.
So I put it on the front page in place of the introduction to being an Apple developer video for the time being.
Right, and basically just to kind of update you guys on the Java course, although we still have probably about maybe 6 hours left to edit, and those of you guys that have ever done any video editing, usually every minute of rolling video is about 10 minutes in the edit room, so as you can see, we still have some work ahead of us, but over the past week, we've added about 3 more hours of completed content, and those of you guys that are on the beta team, you guys have full access to this, and we've already gotten some feedback from some guys that already had some questions, had some comments, and that's great. It's really exciting for us to get that feedback from you guys, because if you guys see something that needs to be elaborated on or needs to be changed or edited, it's your opportunity to get that information to us so that we can make a better tutorial series for everybody else on the site. So definitely, beta guys, keep up the great work. All of you guys have been doing a fantastic job.
When we get feedback like that, we do come back in and add addendums to the courses. So
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we always, each one of those courses aren't just kind of set in stone. They're always they're always growing and flexible.
Absolutely. So in the news, folks, I know that this one's a little belated. Happy belated birthday to Linux, because in April, Linux turned 20 years old, guys.
He's almost old enough to drink.
That is ridiculous. Linus Torvalds released the first kernel in April of 1991, which was the same year as Nirvana's Nevermind, Metallica's Black Album, and Guns N' Roses' Use Your Illusions, and JT, the last time the Redskins appeared and won the Super Bowl.
And the first time?
No, it wasn't. That was the third time.
Okay, never mind.
That was their third Super Bowl victory.
We've had 3 podcasts, and twice Bryan has embarrassed himself with his football knowledge.
2 for 2.
My bet is you'll be able to say the same thing in another 20 years about the Redskins.
Hey.
Because the thing is, other than that 1991 appearance, every single time there's been a work stoppage or a labor dispute in NFL football, the Redskins have won the Super Bowl. And we have had a labor dispute this year. So, and so far the Redskins have looked a little better than everybody thought they would. I'm just saying.
Boy, that's really reaching for it.
Well, we'll see how your Buffalo Bills do this year, Gary. Then. So,
tomorrow.
Go Bills.
So, I was a big Linux fan for a really long time, so it meant a lot to me to say happy birthday to Linux. and saw how it's grown over the years and all that happy stuff. We also have, as we discussed in the last podcast, we had the untimely death of webOS. But Microsoft is starting to make a push to poach some of those former webOS developers. So I think there's been about 1,000 or so former HP employees that have been picked up by Microsoft to start working on the Windows Phone platform.
That's a really smart idea on Microsoft's part. Although sometimes with that many people, I would imagine it's extremely difficult to keep them all doing one cohesive project. I mean, 1,000 people, that's a ton of people working on a project, but I guess that's what it takes.
Yeah, well, maybe Microsoft doing what Microsoft does. They suck them up, they take their knowledge, and then they spit them back out. Who knows?
I was at a store today, and I saw it was the HP touchpad. Is that what it was called?
Yeah.
And I guess they had dropped the price down to about $99 to kind of liquidate their stock, and they were totally sold out. They had a little sign on it that said sold out.
That was actually the big story of last weekend, was that they lowered that price to $99, and there was people waiting at Best Buy for 2 hours to get it. There were people waiting on the phone for hours to buy it from HP Direct. It was a huge fire sale, so you have to wonder, with that kind of, now there's people out there with the device in their hands.
Well, I think
developing for the platform, just because there's going to be people wanting apps, and if your app does something mediocre, somebody's going to buy it because there's no alternative.
And I think a lot of people are buying it with the hopes of installing Android on it and it being a very inexpensive hardware alternative, Because I think the hardware on the devices are great.
That's been a big thing that I've been hearing from a bunch of guys, the whole, jailbreaking it or throwing Android on there. And I actually considered buying one, but at the last minute decided not to. I figured at least it would be something I could use to take notes in a meeting,
I did some playing around with the other Android tablets that were at the store today. There was probably, I'd say there was about 10 of them, none of which were the iPad. So I kind of turned them all on and was playing with them. And what was really interesting is, now that's just in their kind of like natural state of people coming up and screwing with them and opening programs, closing programs and stuff. And most of them had a really jagged feel to them. Like if you would scroll, if you kind of slide from one screen to the next, there'd be kind of a weird delay on your touch, and they would be really jagged moving from screen to screen. The animations weren't very smooth. Mm-hmm. So I still find that interesting that's an issue.
Yeah, but it just demonstrates the Apple Edge on user interface.
Yeah, that's true.
Not so much as the user interfaces, Gary, as Apple has a lot of deals with the component manufacturers to get technology a year before they give it to anybody else. This was a story a few weeks back. And that's actually one of the reasons that HP has cited or kind of alluded to why they've killed the touchpad. It's not so much that webOS was the problem, it's that their hardware was inferior and they couldn't do anything to catch up with it. So
I think
it's a good point, but some of the patents that they have around developing the interface lock some of the people out or makes them do workarounds to get a similar result. And
well, let's also be clear here that Android uses Java. Java runs over top of a VM, and Java's slow. And kind of like as we were talking about last time, the Apple user interface seems to be a lot more fluid because now I know I say this all the time, but you're only developing for a few different devices, which means that all the APIs that you use only have to function in 3 different ways. Whereas when you're dealing with the mobile Java framework, it has to function in a plethora of different ways.
Right.
So if there was like a specific HP touchpad device, or I guess HP touchpad is a bad example, but if there was like one specific Android device and it wasn't running Java, like we were talking about native code last time, Jason was bringing up the return to native code. Objective-C is kind of an example of that. And I think that maybe the Android platform, if they were to move in that direction, they would get the benefits from that. But unfortunately, they use Java, and that's always going to be a problem with Java.
And I think also when there's commands that are written for the GPU on the device, or even the CPU for that matter, if there's any extended functionality on the CPU or any particular commands for the GPU, the programming language, the way it compiles can be specifically tailored to those exact devices. So the exact commands that it needs in the most optimal format possible when you're only programming for one device.
Well, Brian, just to kind of comment back on something you said a second ago, there actually is an entire movement already kind of getting off the ground called TouchDroid, which is just a group of hackers and developers trying to port any flavor of Android they can get to the touchpad. I'm teasing that news to say there's the group, and I also just read an article that said that group may already be dead. So I think I had to what potential it may hold. They buy it for what it can do at the moment, I guess.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Also, another big item in the news is today Steve Jobs from Apple announced his resignation as the CEO of the company. He's still going to be taking an active role in, I think he's going to be on the board, but he's no longer going to be calling the shots. And from what I read, he cited his health as the issue. So what is that going to do to Apple as an organization?
I think it was the best way that he could step down. If he was if he dropped out of the position unexpectedly due to his health, people would freak out. But if he's stepping down on his own terms while the company's doing well and the company can afford to easily take that, with the 7% hit they took today, it's the best time to make that transition for investors to get used to the idea that he doesn't have to be behind the helm to make it a decent company. I mean, obviously, there's so many people involved in making Apple a success. There's no way it can be just one person sitting there on a throne, like, controlling all of the wires, like Neo in the end of the Matrix or something. So
yeah, I mean, Jobs was kind of one of the big visionaries at the company, and really when Apple died when he left, and then it resurged when he came back. I mean, if nothing else, he serves as a really good moral figure, or
living
that
icon,
kind of figure, morale, whatever, icon, there you go. If nothing else, him standing up on stage strutting around with an iPad 2, that image is very comforting to people, knowing that Steve Jobs, the founder of the company, is up there, he's calling the shots. I really at this point don't really know what it's going to do for the company. JT, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I've maintained for a long time that without Steve Jobs that Apple's got kind of a shelf life, I think. They do everything too special.
It happened once before. You're right about that.
But to Apple's credit, though, the last time it happened, they forced him out, and it didn't go well.
Yeah, and it was a weird environment, right?
He's still there to support them in the short term, but they're too specialized. They create devices and operating systems that are very specific for themselves, and that requires kind of a unified vision, and it takes a strong figurehead or leader to create that vision and to enact it, even though there's many other people involved in driving that vision. He's the one that sets it. And without somebody like him at the top, you see what's happening. It's the same kind of thing that's happening at HP, I think, where HP kind of to the whim of its current CEO. A few years ago, the CEO wanted to get into the consumer space more. So they spent a lot of money on developing new laptops with better sound quality or something. Then they wanted to get into the mobile space with their next CEO, and they got into webOS. This new CEO that they got a few months ago wants to get more into the enterprise space, so he drops webOS. If Apple isn't careful, they might jump foot to foot, kind of like HP has. Maybe not in the next 5 years, but I'm talking 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, and they're not as a company that could survive that kind of hopping, so to speak.
That's where Microsoft comes in and takes this whole thing over. I can smell it coming.
The person
I think since the last time he was pushed out, when he came back, he's at least the PR says that he's done a lot of work on succession planning. So the new guy coming in has been somebody that's worked closely with him over time. But
I'll tell you, Gary, a week before Enron fell, the CEO said that they were in the best financial standing they've ever been in. So.
Right, and that does happen. I think playing off of JT's remark, though, the key is that if you read some of the comments out there, that he's really been into all the details of all the product. And even though you think that it should expand as far as not being so rigid and tight, that's probably what he brought was a discipline to stay rigid and tight and keep a very clean product. You know what to expect when you get an Apple product, even though it's not over expansive. That's probably what makes them most successful, not just going off into different markets and different things. So whether the new guy coming in can keep to that discipline and keep them on target is probably going to make the difference as to whether they're going to be a long-term success and continue the way they're going, or someone like Microsoft or something else.
Right, and it does take a lot of balls to stay in the niche market like they did for such a long time. I mean, seriously. Right. I mean, they decided to be a niche PC maker, and then they snuck into the music business. And I'll tell you, my uncle works in the music industry, and I remember having a conversation with him a couple years ago where he said that Apple single-handedly saved the music industry. I mean, remember how Napster and all that stuff, and the way that my uncle put it was Apple made buying music cool again. So they were able to sneak into that little niche, so where they did one thing, then they did two things, now they do three things, and to have a CEO that has, I guess, a big enough set to stick with that business strategy when there's so many other temptations out there, that's to be seen. And that, like you were saying, Gary, will basically end up, will roll out, in front of them what their success will be going forward.
I think there's two potentially.
Unfortunately, what we're probably saying is that he had pancreatic cancer back in '04, and then battled through that. The liver transplant. This is probably a health issue that maybe a very short term that he's even able to stay as the chairman of the board. Unfortunately, he's only 56 years old, but
he tripped a bunch.
Yeah, not many people.
He was a
last
child
that
of the
long
60s.
after. Yeah, not many people last that long after pancreatic cancer. I think there's two big potentially positive factors that Apple might have going for it. I think the first one is that they kind of learned their lesson when Steve Jobs left the first time. And I think they knew that they didn't want to make that mistake. And for so many years, his ailment has been a potential risk. And I think because it's so in their face, and I mean, even physically, every time you see him is a reminder of the risk of him not, sustaining as the CEO of the company, the organization has had a long time to kind of prepare for it. A lot more time than a lot of other organizations would. It was a lot more pressing for them. The other thing, too, is that the person who's replacing him is Tim Cook. Tim Cook went back to Apple with Steve Jobs in '98. He worked for Compaq for about a half a year before that, but he's basically been Steve Jobs' right-hand man since then. He's kind of like a Steve Jobs clone. Like, he even dresses like him if you see pictures of the two of them together. They both have the light jeans and the dark shirt, He seems like a pretty interesting guy. His approach to things and his sense of style and how he sort of solves problems is very close, and he was the chief operating officer of Apple since 2004. So every and all day-to-day operations and all executive decisions of all day-to-day operations all went through him for quite a while now. And I think because he's worked with Steve Jobs, for so long every single day, I would imagine that his point of view is very much in line with Steve Jobs' point of view.
Well, we all here at WiBit.net certainly hope the best for Steve Jobs. Good luck with whatever issues you're dealing with, and we look forward to seeing what happens with Apple in the future. That'll be very interesting to watch. Now, Bryan, you also mentioned to me earlier today some very interesting stuff about a McAfee study. Maybe you could share with us what you were telling me.
Yeah, there's a McAfee study that is claiming that in the second quarter of 2011, Android malware is up by 76%.
That's huge.
And that supposedly, according to their study, who knows, that the iOS basically didn't measure on the stats. The amount of malware on iOS is basically immeasurable. I think one of the big factors is...
Sorry, go ahead.
One of the big things is you got to look at who's the author of the study. Since it's McAfee, you would tend to throw it out because they're obviously looking to sell product. But
what was that, Jason? I'm sorry. Say that again.
McAfee's mobile suite is called McAfee Enterprise Mobility Management.
So Android, between Android and Java ME, it just dominates the mobile market in the amount of malware that shows up on it. But I think one of the things with the iOS devices is they are a lot more restrictive, and you have to go through an approval process to get to the App Store, which is the only kind of recognized way and the main way that apps get on your devices. Of course, if you jailbreak your device, all bets are off. But that becomes such a small percentage of the user market, it's not really worth trying to go after those groups.
Now, this is interesting, Bryan. Guys, I want to kind of throw this out on the floor because I know that, Bryan and Jason is in the security field. Bryan and I are formerly trained in the security field. One of the things that we would always bring up when people tried to defend, Apple doesn't have viruses was, well, if you're going to write a virus, you're going to write a virus for the majority of the market. So if just say Windows dominates 95% of the market, of course you're going to focus on writing viruses and malware for Windows because you have your greatest chance of whatever your intentions are to be successful. Now, how does this relate to
market?
Now, how does this relate to Android?
Well, Android is actually the most dominant smartphone platform in the United States by a decent margin. Now, August 4th, I'm citing a blog here, but it was all over the news there for a little while. But Google has 34.7% of the market share. As of March, as of June, they had 40.1%.
Okay.
Apple has 20.6%. RIM has 23%. Microsoft and webOS each have about 5%.
I'm sure that those statistics are also counting phones that run Android but aren't smartphones.
Right.
But they're still Android nonetheless.
Yeah, but
also,
kind of what a smartphone is, too. I mean, what is a smartphone then?
It's a phone that's really smart.
Considering that it's essentially a non-existent percentage of malware on iOS devices compared to, I mean, it's not like Android is twice the market share. You know,
right?
It still speaks highly of the design of the operating system.
I'm about to blow your all's mind right here with this point. There's no antivirus software for iOS. You can't do it. Apple won't let you install like an antivirus platform in iOS because their system's too locked down. However, there are antivirus programs for Android. So, by existing, did they welcome in malware?
Well, I think by their ability to function.
The supervillain exists because the superhero did, and then by the superhero create the supervillain.
Nice.
I'm pretty sure it's Batman's fault Joker existed, so.
Well, let's also keep in mind, and Brian, we were discussing this in one of the Java courses. Let's also keep in mind that Java Mobile has been dominating a lot of devices for a long time, including parking meters, payphones, DVD players, ATMs. So maybe that's also one of the reasons for the attacks on Java itself.
Right, and when you look at other devices, even BlackBerry is still Java. I mean, you can call it a research and motion device. It's still, just J2ME.
Well, one thing about this study that I think is kind of misleading, and I heard about this study at work because I actually service a lot of McAfee products, including their enterprise mobility management platform. One thing about Android that's different than both RIM and iOS is that you can simply check off an option in Android without rooting it or anything that allows you to install an app from a third-party market or a third-party place. iOS doesn't do that at all. BlackBerry doesn't let you do that at all. Only Android gives you that option as part of the operating system to say, hey, I'll take the risk and install an app from wherever the heck I want to off the internet. And all of that malware is coming from that end of the spectrum. Like none of this malware is coming in. Very little of it is coming into the Android market. And what little of it is coming into the Android market, Google has already put the kibosh on and actually has a kill switch in all the Android devices, the same as iOS does, to kill any malware app that it finds within its marketplace to be malware. So this study, Android does have most of the malware because it's the only platform that gives the user the option to be stupid.
Yeah, just like Windows. Windows versus Unix, it's that same argument.
I mean, some people like that freedom to be stupid. I personally do, but I can totally understand why that's also a detriment and something that people should be aware of. I mean, Android's easy to get on a lot of devices because it's free, so a lot of people will gobble up an Android device and say, hey, look, I got a smartphone, it was only $50. But, the backlash is you get what you pay for there. You get a wide open platform that you can't be dumb with and put yourself at risk with because you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, good points. Good point. Yeah, so very interesting topic. I'd be curious to see how that kind of goes, especially as time goes by and as more and more people are getting into the smartphone market, and also as BlackBerry and Research in Motion is starting to come out with their newer lines of devices. We'll kind of see how that goes.
Oh, I can't wait to see the new RIM devices.
Yeah. Well, and I'm
Sorry,
what's that?
Kevin. I was just going to say the statistics I was citing earlier with the Android's market share growing and they'll be the leader. Apple's staying steady. They're not losing ground on Google at all. It's only RIM that's falling off a cliff and bleeding users to both Android and iOS.
Well, and as a former BlackBerry developer, I can definitely understand why.
Yeah, those are fun days.
Let me remind you, though, worldwide, there was that one article that was 43% of the market over in England, I think it was, is BlackBerry.
What's wrong with them?
Yeah, but you know what, Gary? Like 99% of all Germans like David Hasselhoff.
Hey,
so
they're still buying the product, yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean,
still buying the product.
There's a culture lag. Give them 5 years.
Yeah, but it's still a force in the business environment and in some parts of the world.
I think a lot of businesses can kind of get it to work with Lotus Notes. I think that's why it's still around.
I know. Be able to play to use Android applications in the near future through an emulator. And RIM announced last week that going forward, some of their QSX lines, that's the acronym, they're going to do the same thing on the phones, where the phones can run an Android emulator and play Android apps, because they obviously love their developers so much that they're going to go ahead and poach another platform's developer community.
Yeah, and I'm sure those emulated applications are going to run like butter.
Oh, I know, because Java runs great, especially on top of an emulator that has an emulator running on top of it. I mean, that had nothing but success. That had nothing but success written all over it, guys.
Yeah, I think they're paving the way of the future. I'm not holding my breath for Windows Mobile Phone 7, but I'll be really excited to see what they do for Windows Mobile Phone 8. I was at Microsoft's Tech Ed when they did the first demo of the Windows Mobile Phone 7. Mm-hmm. So there's probably 10,000 people in this massive, huge building. And, they get up there and, like, Windows Mobile Phone 7, and they show it, and it starts, like, wobbling around on the screen, and everybody's, like, looking around like, what the hell is that thing?
Well, Bryan, you also had a really cool thing about Microsoft, about the PC world that we're living in.
Yeah, so Apple has been pushing this idea that we're in a post-PC world, and that's why they're being so successful on the tablets and everything. Microsoft has been trying to counterspin this with PR, and I kind of agree with Microsoft on this. They're not saying post-PC world, they're saying a PC plus world. The way that I use computers, and I think I'm not out of the ordinary in this, is people tend to have a powerful laptop or a powerful desktop as kind of their base of operations, and all of their mobile devices sort of spawn off of that. And so this is really a PC plus other devices, not a no PC environment.
I don't know how Apple can say that, considering you have to use iTunes to do every damn thing on the freaking iPhone.
Right.
You still need to have a base PC.
I don't know if they're considering their thin laptops PCs or not. I'm not sure.
But that's right. Yeah.
iOS 5 is supposed to allow for OTAs and stuff, so you won't need iTunes anymore after iOS 5.
Right.
Thank goodness.
But I do think that the idea of for a lot of people anyway, I think the idea of a relatively strong workstation will be around for a long time, but there is a lot of people who just browse the internet and check email and a couple other things. And for that,
right. I mean,
maybe they don't need a PC. I don't know. Right. So maybe it's a dwindled PC plus.
I think that guys like us, there's no way. I can do a lot of work on my iPad, but I can't sit there and write an application on my iPad.
And you probably never
will. Difficult. Right, and I couldn't do the recording that we're doing right now on a mobile device. My PC
or video editing or running virtual machines of different operating systems that emulate servers that you would develop for. But or I guess games are debatable, but I still think that the PC world will start reducing itself to power users.
Right.
And
kind of like how it used to be back in the good old days.
Yeah, basically. But I do think that there will be shrinkage in the PC world. It's going to get a little.
It actually might not be a bad thing for us real, desktop and laptop users, because if you remember back in the day, PC hardware was awesome, and then what they did is they made it accessible. So then you go out and you buy a computer, and it lasts a year, and then it breaks, and it's constantly having overheating issues because the software is accessible. Even though they tell you that you have this fast processor, well, the infrastructure in the box isn't designed to use that infrastructure. That's just the selling point. So, maybe it'll be a really good thing for us PC users to actually kind of go back to our roots, which is having a big, badass, awesome machine that just works. Well, I guess before we get out of here, guys, I do want to say that I am grateful that we all survived the great earthquake of 2011 on the East Coast here. We had, what was it, a 5.9, 5.8?
Yeah, which was, even though it just felt like a little wobble.
Well, I'll tell you this. When I came home from work, because our building was evacuated, the building I was in was closer to the D.C. area where it was a little, I don't know, I guess maybe it was more tough down there. But when I came back to the house, my wife's toothbrush had fallen on the floor. It was devastating.
But that's nothing like the size of the earthquake that I heard that they had down in Peru.
No, Peru's only 5.9.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it was 1 point higher than ours. The difference, though, is that I think Peru's was the topsoil up here I don't know if you noticed, but the earthquake up here was felt like in Maine and everything.
Yeah.
I heard that seismographs in Canada picked it up.
I heard somebody on the moon felt it.
Well, that's because our topsoil is a little bit looser from what I understand, so the seismic waves kind of dissipate faster and travel further. But in Peru, it's a little bit more mist, I think, a little bit, the topsoil is a little bit more condensed. So it was a more powerful quake than what we felt, even though it was only technically slightly more powerful, I think.
And an update to that is I can see on here that it's up to 7.0 magnitude for the Peru earthquake.
Really? Oh,
Pretty good size, yeah.
Big.
Yeah, I think that was probably called earlier today, and they updated it since then.
And I think the scale is kind of exponential.
Yesterday morning there was a 5.1 in Colorado also.
Yeah, you're right, and it didn't even make major news.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the earthquake here, I thought that somebody who just came up behind me and shook my chair. You know, it wasn't all. I was like, yeah, all right, you wise guy.
What, to wake you up again, Kip?
Yeah, you know how it is. It happened at 2:00 in the afternoon. I hadn't had my coffee yet. You know how I get.
Right. Down to the vending machine.
Whenever something like this happens, everybody goes outside and they're like, "Oh yeah, I was at the vending machine, and then it started happening, so I came outside." Everybody kind of has the same story. Everybody in my office had the same story. Oh well, I thought Jason was just playing a prank on us. That was everybody in my office's story.
Not to bring up some bad memories, but I know that since I was working in the D.C. area, some folks were kind of scared about terrorism because like September 11th was coming up. So some people were, as they evacuated our building, some people were yelling at us to go back inside just in case it was a bomb. Thankfully, it wasn't.
Yeah, I thought the Earth was broken in half and floating out in outer space. So
I thought that I just farted really, really loud, and that's.
All right.
I think one of our forum moderators is in the area that the Peru one hit. So
certainly hope the best for anybody that was affected by any of these pissed off Earth issues that are happening now. See what we're doing? We're pissing the Earth off, and it's trying to kill us all. Now, you guys, we have a hurricane coming on this weekend too. So we're just pissing everybody off, man.
Yeah, right.
Wait till the frogs start flying from the sky.
Last hurricane I was in, I was in Hurricane Wilma back in, I think, 2004. It was a month or so after Katrina, and I was sitting out on the back deck. I lived in Florida at the time, and frogs and little foxes and stuff, they just go flying through the air. They got nothing to hold on. Oh, yeah, hurricanes are crazy like that.
You know what this reminds me of? The last point I'm going to make. Sorry, I have to throw this in there. The frogs falling reminded me of the song It's Raining Men. You know the song?
Brian, please don't start singing "It's Raining Men."
I won't.
We had to hear you talk about ballet last time. I don't know if I could handle it another time.
But what kind of like messed up, satanic, horribly angry song is that? I mean, this lady is like so pissed off at men that she's just standing there like watching men falling from the sky, splattering in this horrible bloodbath on the floor. I mean, the song is disgusting.
I think the context of the song is that there's a lot of men.
Nice clothes, guys.
Yeah. Well, on that note, everybody, webit.net podcast episode 3 is coming to a conclusion. Thank you very much for listening, and we will give you another one as soon as we can. And we'll see you guys on the site. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for supporting webit.net. For more content, please visit webit.net, wibit.net.